Hey, Carl Bushby, talking to you from Montana in Bulgaria. I promised you the next part of the story of the Darian Gap. So part one, we had actually managed to get to the river system. So we'd come up like 300 kilometers worth of road, disguised as a hobo, and sneaked across into the jungle to get through these like Everglades, these swamps, to get to a massive river called the Atrato, which kind of separates Colombia from the Darien Gap. Interesting time, because now basically we have to get 4 days up this river before we get to a point where there's firm enough ground for us to get out of the river into the jungle and then make our way towards Panama. The problem with the rivers are the highways of the jungles. So basically, friend and foe alike use those rivers to travel. Everyone uses them, good guys, the bad guys. We don't have any option because we can't use any form of transport, so we can't use a boat as such. Now, what we have done in the past is river crossings. And a river crossing is basically you float, you just get in and swim with your equipment, etc. So all we were going to do in this case was an extended river crossing, if you like, for 4 days. To do it and not get captured, basically what we did is we had this combat vest that we were using for the jungle phase. It was a vest used by the Colombian army. And we could use that with plastic bottles in those pouches, and then that would basically act as like a life vest with a couple of bottles stuck up the front, empty plastic bottles like Coke bottles or something. And then we could have a couple of those bottles and plastic bags in my backpack, and that would all float. And then what we do is just camouflage me and the backpack so that we would float down the river disguised as floating debris. The interesting thing with the Atrato River, it's a big jungle river, and there's things that live in it. So while we were in Medellin researching this whole endeavor, we had looked at what lives in that river, and people had always talked about man-eating things, but there was actually nothing in there that was really that threatening. There was no piranhas or anything like that like you might find in, say, the Amazon. And in the middle of the these jungle rivers of the Atrato, there'd be a lot of floating debris. So there's like large pans of floating debris that would congregate into chunks, and I would mix with that to hide. And you'd come across, crocodiles sitting on those large pans. So you'd be moving around the edges of these things in the water, just floating, with this vest and stuff on, and you'd meet one like kind of nose to nose, a common, who would just be sitting there. And these things can get pretty big, especially when you kind of meet them at eye level. About a meter into that water, it's warm water. Then below that, it's actually quite cold. It cools off pretty quick. So you spend all day in the water, and sometimes you would get pretty chilly. So I would end up making my way to the banks